We've seen Kamala, we've seen Michelle Obama, we've seen Biden. Who knows what they're trying to do?
But I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna steal it. That's what we're gonna do.
COVID was around, so we needed to social distance. At least that's what we thought at the time. And I think, again, if anybody disagrees, I think we can all agree that Trump can build a larger rally and get more people there. But the claim that, without really campaigning, which, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think that's controversial to say he campaigned from the basement. How, if that was the case, how did he get so many more votes?
Well, I think part of it.
Well, I mean, there was growing sentiment against Trump in general, right?
But Trump got more vote. Trump got the second most votes of any president in history.
Yeah, but when you have a sitting president and you just sort of get, I guess, society as a whole, once you get sort of tired of that person, especially since Trump had so many antics, I think there were a lot of people that just didn't want more of the same. It's the same reason why his approval ratings were low and why Biden's approval ratings were low. Granted, you may feel like there's other reasons why Biden's approval was low, and there might be, but it seems like people were just sort of tired of that. It was even to the point where it was people were saying that they're going to vote for Biden just not to vote for Trump. So it makes sense that that Biden got those votes.
Yeah, and I would, and then you even look at people like the Daily Wire, and they don't push Trump, they push Ron DeSantis. You can see that there's a dividing line even on the Republican side, where I would say there's less of one on the left side.
Yeah. Well, there's no Trump on the left side.
No, I'm saying in the factors of who they're voting for, who it's Biden. That's the only person running. Well, on the Republican side, there's all these dividing lines between Vivek and Trump and Ron DeSantis, where people are splitting away and not wanting to vote for Trump.
Right, but that's pretty common within incumbencies, right? Obama didn't really have serious competition when he was running for re-election either.
Yeah, you have to remember it was an open election when in 2016. So there on both sides there was the fight. Whereas who knows what they're going to do with the Democrats? Who knows what they're going to do? We've seen Kamala, we've seen Michelle Obama, we've seen Biden. Who knows what they're trying to do?
I'll tell you what we're gonna do. We're gonna steal it. That's what we're gonna do.
Again.
Yes.
Just kidding. Okay, so Nick brings up something interesting. He said, quit raining minimum wage. Inflation just makes it like everyone making more are essentially making that much less, while the people at minimum wage can't buy any more with their money. Well, actually, let me ask you guys first. Where do you fall on raising the minimum wage?
I think it's often necessary, especially in areas where you have higher cost of living. What it in part forces companies to do is to divert more of their funds towards their workers as opposed to shareholders or CEOs, which I think is a large reason why there's so much economic disparity within the country. It's true that it does in part increase inflation. I just think that the net effect that it has rising the wages of workers is positive for the country, especially in high income areas.
Well, I would argue that is theoretically that is what is supposed to happen. But I just and Josh definitely agree. But I would say I just heard this from Dave Smith, and he was talking about how the minimum wage argument clicked for him. That we like to talk about the minimum wage as a platform for poor people. We want to get them up to this platform, so we want to raise the minimum wage. So if you take that to an absurd degree, so okay, let's raise the minimum wage to $1,000 an hour. How is that going to affect poor people? They're not going to get more jobs. No, they're not worth $1,000 an hour. What if it was zero? There was no minimum wage. Well, then a lot more people would be able to work for $1, $2, $3 an hour and build up to something there. And when I heard that idea of minimum wage not being a platform, but instead a barrier, that you have, excuse me, voice cracking there, that you have to be at that level. You have to be worth the minimum wage to be employed.
Well, and I think if you look at what the minimum wage was back in, what was it, the 70s that was first instituted, Back then, it was enough to sort of get by. You might have been able to afford an apartment, maybe with a roommate or two, but it was still a livable amount of money, right? But we've seen that minimum wage hasn't kept up with productivity. Generally speaking, regardless of which sector you look at, if you have minimum wage workers, they're doing more work in less amount of time than they were back in the 70s, just because the means to do that work has gotten more efficient. So the fact that it hasn't kept up with that productivity, I think is an indication that we're falling behind on that obligation to provide that baseline for people to be able to survive. Whereas nowadays, I think if you have a minimum wage in any of the 50 states, you can't afford half of a 2-bedroom apartment. Like
Right.
it's a homeless wage is what it is.
Go ahead, Miles.
So like as it brings up inflation, and also it destroys smaller businesses from being able to develop, because if you are a company, like let's say you're trying to start up your own fast food chain and you can only have one store, well, you might not be able to afford an employee for $15 an hour minimum wage. So it's just you working there, and you can't compete with McDonald's hours because you can't be there by yourself for
Yep.
24 hours. So, but McDonald's can afford that $15 an hour to hire someone. They can, and then they can also raise their prices more, where you can't raise your prices because you're probably already scraping by, and they can afford to raise their prices because no matter they're McDonald's, more people are going to come to McDonald's than some
Right.
small.
Ideally, that if we raise the minimum wage, a company like McDonald's can take from their the CEO bonuses and give it to the workers. But we know that's not what happens. We know that's not what happens. We've seen it not happen. We've seen them just be at the minimum wage. Then they're hiring less people. They're automating things. And so it just seems like a well packaged bad idea, because most people that I talk to think that raising the minimum wage is a good thing when it has never seemed to be.
How it's packaged. It's packaged. Don't you want more money? You're going to get more money. And
Right.
then they don't want to tell you all of the wrapping that goes with that to get to
I
that
think it's
gift.
also just packaged ethically, where it's like, oh, these people should be making more, but instead of focusing on what is actually going to happen in the end, it's
Right.
just talking about how the process, like, oh, it's moral, they should be doing this and this and that. But it's like, I feel like a lot of people get way too like invested in like the moral aspects of what we should be doing, as opposed to like what is actually going to happen if we implement that.
Thanks so much for watching, guys. If you enjoyed that clip, check out the full live stream link in the bio and catch me live every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, 8 p.m. Eastern. See you there.